Okay.
Yes.
Um, right. I'm sorry, my colleague hasn't been able to join us as yet. Hopefully, she will. Um, oops. Sorry about that. Okay. So this topic is actually been we haven't started, but we have discussed this. Pauline and myself have discussed this quite on numerous occasions, and I always wanted to do using the Gujarati households, but originally it just was for pensions. Um, and with Pauline's guidance, we decided that we should also include financialization, and you'll see why it's quite appropriate for the group that we may be considering to be interviewed in this analysis. So it's going to be a qualitative research using both focus groups and interviews. Um, and the issues that we consider um, in this specific Gujarati household groups are financialization, migration issues, and issues of transnationalism, as well as post-colonialism. And we households rather than just Gujarati women, which was actually the original idea, but we are now extending it to include households. So the we started by reading Randy Martin's work on financialization of daily life. And this is quite a very small book, but it's really interesting. And he talks about how to mitigate future risk with the help of pension funds, savings, and investment products, including debts for home ownership. And he says that households are increasingly interacting with financial products, and the financial motivation is now entering everyday life. Okay, and therefore the title of his book, Financialization of Daily Life. And just to have a couple of quotes from his book, most of these are from the first two chapters, and it talks about financialization, which asks people from all walks of life to accept risks into their homes that were hitherto the province of professionals. And without significant capital, people are being asked to think like capitalists. So it's the individualization of people who are now taking the risk and to think like a capitalist. And the second quote, financialization has much to do with treating all economic activity in the same way as it does on seeing an equivalence between individual workers, businesses, and governments all become agents subject to the same structures of opportunity and decision. So, in this aspect, we are considering that individuals are more like financial professional financial investors, but possibly without the education that a professional financial investor would have had. And the third one, financialization, insinuates an orientation towards accounting and risk management into all domains of their life. So this is with the idea that individuals are taking
Nita, just
sorry.
sorry to interrupt. We don't see the slides, so in
Oh,
case, yeah,
oh,
can
I
you?
forgot to share them.
Yeah,
Oh, so
it would be
sorry.
much
Okay,
easier
let
for
me
us.
go back.
No problem. Just yeah.
Forgot to share them. Do I just open the file now that I want to share? Do I have to load it? Right, can you see it now? Hello, Lorena, can
Not
you see?
yet. Maybe hiding and
Yeah, that's fine. If you prefer, I can share them from here, Neeta. Just bear with me.
Okay.
at
Oh, we did that at the test.
the train. Yeah.
It's a bigger file. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to start again?
Which slides are you on
I
now?
was on the second and the third one. I was on the third one.
And now who is control over the slides? Is it? I didn't.
Yeah, I have control over them. That's
So
fine.
yeah. So maybe Nita, you just say next slide.
Okay. Could we not try that I have control? Should we try? Okay, it doesn't matter. Is it big enough for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And can I go to the previous slide? I haven't got. Yeah. So this is from the book of Randy Martin, Financialization of Daily Life, and it was quite a treasure to find this book and read it through. Um, and he taught, and this concept of financialization of daily life is embracing most households, and we want to kind of see how the Gujarati households. Um, I'll distinguish the Gujarati households a little bit later to the group that we are going to be interviewing. How it embraces the daily life of an individual here. Next slide. Okay, now this one, so Langley, he talks about individualization and responsibility and risks within an Anglo-American pension systems, and he talks about how individuals are being forced in behaving like professional investors, and it's also coming as part of the government trying to reduce their responsibility into individuals saving individual savings, and the government initiating individual saving. The onus is now on individuals to decide how to save, what to save, decide on the financial products, as well as take the necessary risks that are required so that they may have sufficient income being generated when they retire. On the obviously this is all to do with the pensions and the problems that the government are going to face, that the state pension is just not going to be sufficient to uh, to accommodate individuals in the lifestyle that they expect to have during their retirement. And Hillig also talks about private private asset ownership, where individuals consider that investment in house ownership is probably the largest form of asset ownership, and they consider that asset ownership is probably their main item besides savings and pension funds as part of their retirement income that they might require when they retire or for their later life. So this is obviously being also initiated and pushed by the government, that individuals should start thinking about their retirement. But there are problems. There are, like Ola Goff and Rod Hicks suggests, that one of the problems here is the myopic view that individuals take. For example, they often don't consider during their lifetime, working lifetime, to put any money aside for retirement, or they think they don't really want to think about it until they are in their 40 to 50s, and that's probably already too late. So, and then also there are the needs, that these needs, that their current needs are probably more important than what they might want to think about in 20, 30, maybe even 40 years time. So that there is, that causes kind of problems for people investing for their retirement or saving for their retirement, um, for the future life. Heidi, next slide, please. Now, the second issue that we look into is migration, because as far as the Gujarati people are concerned, they have been migrating for several generations, I would say. So it obviously, even within India, they were migrating, and then they moved to East Africa, mostly East Africa, and then from East Africa, because of issues, both political and social issues, they have now either migrated to UK, Canada, and some even to US, even to Australia as well. And we are talking about second and third generations living in these developed countries. And migration has been widely studied in other disciplines, um, and includes both temporary as well as permanent migration. And we've also got migration studies mostly about the Ugandan Asian refugees, and that's quite prominently written. One of them, a very old one, is the 1998. Mastus has written about it, and we've also got labor migration from Commonwealth countries in the post-war period, Block and Schuster. The reasons for migration are um, quite wide, quite diverse. It's not always just looking at social and economic, be political issues, and like the Ugandan Asians, they were also refugee. They came in as refugees, but the focus of our paper is Kenya, and they didn't come as refugees, so they came into UK because they chose to come to UK, having held British passports under the British colony regime. And a paper that we quote in our draft version is Agyeman and Lehman. Yeah, I think it's a CPA paper, and they talk about diverse migrations, how there is a lot of controversial issues and cultures that are tran- uh, trans- transgressing across the globe. And what they found is that the critical accounting scholars work in this area is quite less. There isn't enough, so there is obviously a gap there that we can explore. And one of the other authors, Anisette and Trivedi, they talk about this is a kind of a different migration. This is more like controlled migration if you like, of professional accountants from India to Canada, where it was the Canadian government allowing an educated group of migration as compared to the unskilled migration that we often associate with migration studies. Heidi, next slide, please. Okay, now the next issue is transnationalism, and I I remember before I started working on this, when I did my MBA, transnationalism was really associated with transnational or multinational companies. So it was quite an inspiration to look at transnationalism under the migration studies and ethnography studies. So it was kind of really interesting here. And the Oxford English Dictionary defines transnational as extending or having interests extending between national bounds or frontiers associated with multinationals. And Skeeler, Barsh, and Blanc, they use transnationalism under uh, under an anthropological interest, and they talk about how anthropology interest has grown to include flows of culture and population across national borders and resulting in a cultural diffusion within the host countries. Now, Skiller also cites Appadura, who suggests that ethnography also needs to determine the nature of the locality as lived experience in a globalized and deterritorialized world. Difficult word for me. And so this we want to work on the lived experiences of these Gujarati women, and so this citation I think was quite important for us. And obviously there are with transnational migration, there are issues relating to global restructuring, capitalism, racism, and political loyalties. So, for example, because of political loyalties, you might get migration being allowed from certain countries. So, like the Commonwealth, you have migration coming between the Commonwealth countries, and most of it in the UK and Canada. And I remember quite clearly around the 1972, when we had these when Idi Amin asked all the Ugandan Asians to leave Uganda, and within like 10 days of that announcement, and I remember very clearly His Highness the Aga Khan, the leader of the Aga Khan movement, um, he went into talks with the governments, and he secured a large number of his community to go to Canada. So there's a whole group of Asian community in Canada who belong to his community, and some of them obviously chose to come to UK, and there are reasons why we choose to come to UK or Canada or Australia or you is the language is not a barrier, because we our education is in English, so language is not a barrier. And so that, and obviously um, there's a preference to stay within your community, uh, so you don't feel so isolated. So, so we there's a strong evidence in the literature that immigrants are seen as interconnected networks, not only maintaining family ties um, with their homeland, because there's always some keen remaining in the homeland. They also send remittances, and these are sufficient, uh, not only to purchase houses in their homeland, but also to supplement income for maybe the elderly family members as well. And a lot of them have often returned home to purchase real estates, and most of it is financed by their overseas earnings. Okay, even to this day, it's still going on, not just among twice migrated individuals, but also the first migrated individuals as well. Right, can we have the next slide, Heidi? Um, this work also impinges on on the well, not just post-colonial, but colonial, as well as decolonization and hence post-colonialization. Now, again, the Oxford English Dictionary defines this post-colonial, and they use the hyphenated form of post-colonial rather than a single term post-colonial, and post-colonial occurring or existing after the end of the colonial rule. But we find that there is still strong evidence um, of post-colonialism even after independence has been given to the African states in East Africa. So, so I think Suki Sian, who talks about the counting professional bodies in Kenya at different stages, um, has said that during the post-colonial era, even after Kenya received independence, there was strong evidence that the the professional, the accounting professional body was an elite structure for the white um, um, for the white members of the society and the white expatriates in Kenya. Obviously, by 1963, when we got independence, there was strong Africanization movement, and it was not until 1970 that the counting professional body was uh, reformed and opened up to Africans who could then be educated and become members of the Kenyan um, professional accountancy body. So, this is quite emotional actually as well here. Um, so, so we need to also understand the colonial genealogy of contemporary globalized ideologies, discourses, and practices. And post-colonial analysis demonstrate continuity and divergences over time as well as space, and more specifically how forms of rule, culture, and practices traveled over colonial space and time and subsequently reworked in the post-independence period. And uh, and this is really common because Kenya was really quite uh, distinctly divided between the white settlers, the Asians, and even the Africans, and a lot of the problems there was the the colony. Obviously, the British empire didn't want to let go, but there was a strong movement of Africanization and eventually received independence in 63. But the president of that time, 19 President Jomo Kenyatta, he even had to serve um, time in prison before he was allowed to become president of Kenya. Um, Heidi, next slide. So, coming to our focus, we want to discuss individualization or individuals' lived expenses of managing their household finances as well as pensions within the context of their community, both over time and across three continents. So we are going back to a group of people who studied with me, and I'm not young, who studied with me. Not only we were together in a nursery school, but we were also together in the primary school. The reason we all studied together was the schools were a community school, and everybody just sent their children to the community school. And it's only after that we dispersed into different schools and further and higher education. So this is quite unique, and we're also looking at a particular niche within the Gujarati households as well. And the gaps that we've identified are the two gaps. Garf and Heek, although they talk about later life planning and savings for minority groups within UK, and they talk about the British Asians, the British Pakistanis, and the Africans as the three categories that they consider. But and as far as the Asians, the group that they look at it in a generic term. So we are much more specific to the Asian group within the UK. And then Eggman and Lehman, they talk about critical accounting scholars are less engaged with the discourse. So we also contribute to that area as well. And both myself and Pauline are accounting scholars. I may and and definitely Pauline is a critical accounting scholar. Um, um, Heidi, next slide, please. Um, so this is specifically to all the Gujarati migration to Kenya. All these Gujaratis were they moved into Kenya from India, and the Masters says that the myth that the majority of the current East African Asians were descendants of contracted or indentured laborers brought by the British from India to work on the constructions of the railway line. He actually says that this is not really true about the Gujarati migration. Most of them actually moved to East Africa to sort of find better prospects which they couldn't in their own homeland. And there's two autobiographies by Yasmin Alibai Brown, and she challenges the reconstruction of the history of the community that settled in East Africa and which, due to political adversity, had to disperse mainly to India, Canada, and the UK. And her work is, she talks about the issues up to the stage of the exodus in East Africa. And she sounds angry and resilient the obliteration of the Asian community in Uganda. Okay. It's quite interesting. The two books are quite interesting to read as well. And there is also evidence that Indians did not arrive into East Africa as indentured laborers brought by the British. Trade was ongoing even prior to the British Empire, and it was not until more adventurers wanted to leave their own homelands to find better opportunities in other continents, and one of them was obviously Africa. Now, there's a very nice story. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to put that one up. Um, this was written by my father-in-law, but and his father was one of the first individuals to arrive in in Kenya, and the start of the Oshwal community. Heidi, next slide, please. So, CN, well, there are various papers written by CN 2006, 2007, 2000 and 2011, and she distinguishes between white settlers, Indians, and the Africans in Kenya, and she discusses the development of the professional accountants in Kenya, education sector. Now, as Gujaratis, we have been quite a strong hold in Kenya as far as the economic growth is concerned. And there are some key names: Chandarya, Karimji, Hindochas, Mehtas, and Madhwani's group of industries from as early as 20th century. Out of that group, only the Chandaryas are Jains. The rest are all Karimjis, possibly not Hindus, probably I think he belonged to the Aga Khan Foundation. Hindochas and Mehtas are all, and Madhwanis are all um, Hindus as well. So you could have Gujaratis as mainly Hindus, but all the Oshwals are Jains, which is not Hinduism. Heidi, next slide, please. Okay, the key developments in Kenyan history and the Gujarati community, I think we are maybe pushing for time a little now. So obviously in the colonial era, they, although the British actively encouraged the settlement of Asians in East Africa, but there were also problems. There was prejudice suffered by the Asians. We couldn't be landowners. There was very little political representation. There was lack of jury trial, and also we couldn't hold higher post in the civil services, and and we could only perform certain types of trade. A lot of industries were banned from Asian trading. Okay, and obviously things changed during the African nationalization, but there was still uh, enormity towards the Asian, because we seem to be controlling a lot of the economics, and we I suppose in reality maybe we didn't identify with the Africans. We were resented as well, and their UNC in 2050 does show support by the Asians for the local independent movement. And there were also journalists. Um, One person I remember very clearly, and his son was a very close friend of our Pranlal Sheth, KP Shah, who was my father's uncle. They did support these independent movements. In fact, they were journalists and they helped write about it. And under Ian MacLeod, there were two political parties, two political African parties, the KANU and the KADU. And there were also these minor political parties, the Kenyan Indian Congress and the Kenyan Muslim League, which then, after independence, these two parties disappeared. And the Asians have supported the African nationalists. It's just not been given prominence in the literature. And the key date is 1972, when the Ugandans, Asians, were asked to leave. And that actually perhaps was the catalyst for the Kenyan as well as the Tanzanian East African Asians, and to some aspects, even places like Zambia as well, that forced the Asians to leave Kenya. And some obviously stayed, but possibly a member of the family did move out of Kenya as well. Heidi, next slide. Um, Now, one reason why Asians moved to Britain is because of the British colonial system. And in 1963, under Ian MacLeod, there were negotiations for in East African independence. And within this independence, the three key issues that if you were born, one of the parents was born in East Africa, then you had automatic right to become citizen of the new African state. But there was still flexibility to retain the status of the British subject of a or a British protected person. I think the Africans resented this, and they felt that we didn't give enough support to their movement because we didn't make the decision to take over African citizenship or Kenyan citizenship. There was a grace period of 2 years, and a lot of people actually chose to become British subjects for various reasons. And there was a really take up local citizenship because they wanted to work, they wanted to start their businesses or continue with their businesses, and women remained British subjects. So there was often a mix there anyway. Heidi, next slide. And our second focus is on the Oshwal community in the UK. So Oshwals are all Gujaratis, and Gujarati, and but we are distinct that we don't follow the Hindu religion, but we are all Jains. And there are estimated about 25,000 Oshwals in the UK. And this website is actually a web page for our community, and it's quite interesting. It gives an insight into the Oshwa community within UK. Heidi, next slide. And the history of the Oshwa, I think the Oshwas are migrators. We've been moving for quite some time, and it actually goes beyond Jam Raval, who formed. There were two brothers, and one of the brothers, because of dispute between the two brothers, moved and formed a new kingdom near Jamnagar, which is a city in Gujarat, on the western side of India. And the Oshwas who followed him settled in 52 villages. Even today, we are recognized by the name of the village that we are associated with. So if anybody wants to associate me, I just have to give the name of the village, and they will know who my ancestors are, and probably come up with their own stories. So it's quite interesting when as soon as I tell them which village I come from. Oh yes, I know this person, that person, and the whole linkage is been talked to us about that. Now, this is the story or the book that I held up earlier when um, one of these four men was the grandfather of my husband, and the two men were actually in were the first two Oshwals to move to Kenya, and thereafter um, the whole community has grown. And I hear stories from my mother-in-law how individuals who would come into Kenya would come, stay with them, eat with them. The grandfather would give them money or find them jobs, and they would stay with them until they found jobs and housing for themselves. So the story goes back quite a way back. Um, Next slide, Heidi. So this again is a story about the migration to the UK from Kenya, and it goes back to 1930 when about five Oshwal students came just for education, but all five went back. It wasn't until 1950 we had the arrival of permanent settlers to the UK of Kishore Megji, Harakchan Lakamsi, and Venichan Kimchin. These were all entrepreneurs, and if you go to Tesco even today, under the world products, you will see the name Birani. It's still there. So his children and his grandchildren have taken over the business. But just like my husband's grandfather helped a lot of other Oshwal settle in Kenya, Kishobai Birani did the same to a lot of Oshwals who came to UK around, especially in the 1960s and the 1970s. And obviously 1960s, 1970s prompted a lot of Oshwals with British passports to migrate. And it's not the this migration is different from students who came here, decided to study here, and stayed on because prospects were far better here. And over time, UK has always allowed a few British or Gujaratis to come into UK under a voucher system. Next slide, Heidi. Um, Now, we this communication has actually done very well in UK. We progress not just in business and education, uh, and we are also quite big philanthropists as well. I have, but some of these Jains have also been recognized for their work through the UK honours system, and received OBEs as well as MBEs. So these were made, I can't remember which year, 2019. Vinod Kapasi, Vilas Bendanani, and Kusum Shah. Um, and they've contributed towards the welfare the community as well as others. And it's been cited in by Gareth Thomas there about the Jain community and contribution to the UK. Heidi, next slide. Bit of lightness here. This is our temple, the Jain temple, and it's quite a unique piece of work made from pink marble, and it's in Potter's Bar. So if ever you are in Potter's Bar, you can visit them. I'm not so sure about the opening hours because it's not open all the time, but it's quite an iconic piece. I think there are about 28 acres of land where this is built, and a lot of our community events are held in that area as well. There's another hall around that where the community events are held. Next slide, please.
Neeta, sorry,
Yeah.
just if you can wrap up so that
Okay, can I have 5 more minutes?
yeah, just
All right, so very quickly, the Jainism is there's a Jainism exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and this is one of the pictures of one of the 24 Tirthankars. Heidi, next slide, please. Um, Next slide. I want to talk about Jainism. Right, our methodology. No, previous one. Previous. Yeah, okay. Our methodology is to focus on the women who have been studying together with me during and later primary school, and at the moment we are going to study the women and potentially their children to get a different aspect of household financialization. Next slide, please. And at the moment, it's only going to be exploratory given the nature of the research. Obviously, our limitation is doing focus groups and interviews online because of the COVID. Next one. I'll discuss the next 2 points in the next slides. Next slide. So the nature of the focus group is this focus group serves the purpose of sensitizing my my issues. So we are looking at ethnography here, and it's important as a member of the community that I remain biased, but at the same time bring in aspects of every interview. And we are hoping to use semi-structured interview questions after we've focused on used a focus group as well. Heidi, next. Now, the nature is to build on the work of Buzaki, who studied over 50 years work of a single immigrant couple in Canada, and they looked at the personal taxable income over 50 years. So it was a longitudinal study, and the link between the individual's life courses um, over these 50 years. So it could be change in their work, change in their education, possibly, and even right up to their retirement. And they um, they also looked at issues like marriage, birth of children, and this is what we hope to do for the migrated Jain community in West London. Next slide. So we are using autoethnography, which is this has origins in anthropology as well as sociology, and it includes studying people in their cultural settings. So autoethnography is supported predominantly by interdisciplinary symbolic interaction, is serving a critical role in defining autoethnography. And we look at Alice and Book. Richardson is quite interesting because he turns the interviewee's words into like poems. So it's quite interesting to read that work as well. And Anderson here distinguishes between evocative autoethnography and analytic ethnography, to where um, which we want to do, the analytic autoethnography, where the researcher is a full member of the research group of setting. so incorporating researchers' own feelings and experiences. Heidi, next slide. And we also looked at the study done by Venter and de Villiers, where they used analytic autoethnography in the study of the accounting profession in South Africa. A lot of these have got quite a lot of people for interviews, in the 40 interviews, maybe 60 interviews. And I think that's going to be our limitation. We won't find so many interviews. Next slide. So our anticipated findings that men generally are decision makers of financial matters, and this has also been found in other studies. And we want to think about what think about big items of expenditures, insurance policies, and one of the things that I have found is that affluent families have also set up now education trusts, have special expense accounts for marriages and living expenses for women. And most of these families are employed and self-employed, and they have invested in properties and shares rather than private pensions. So, or there may be a mixture of private pensions. So we want to explore more of those areas, the high expenditure items, and who are the financial decision makers. Are the women, or is it jointly made, or is it the male who are making these kind of financial decisions? Next one, please. That's really so. Although these families are either employed and self-employed, we find that they do invest in properties and shares, have bank savings as well as government bonds, and a lot of them um, want not to spend their money into pensions, even if they are occupational pensions. Um, this has come from one of the works I did for Ola Gulf, where we did interviews of ethnic minority. And most individuals' main investment is real estate. And we want to look at also at people starting businesses later in life. How do they provide themselves with an income? And write about the decline in pensions in the UK, especially from the government. Okay. And we also want to consider how did they become educated, or how did they become obtain their knowledge and literacy in these financial products. And one of the aspects is if they haven't considered um, savings for their retirement, is probably because of the culture where children tend to look after their parents. Last slide. Okay, so I've finished now, and it's time for some comments or questions. It's very much at a draft stage at the moment.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Neeta. Because of the time, I'm aware, maybe we'll have Pauline discussion about the research team at the end, and we'll go ahead with the Q&A.
Yes.
So if anyone has any comments and questions, if you want to ask question in anonymous way, you just type your questions in the chat. Otherwise, you just raise your hands and we'll give you the floor. Any comments, questions? I can see. Okay, maybe I can start.
Yes, Lorena.
Yeah, basically what I wanted to ask, and it's because at the end I wasn't quite sure. It was about your positionality in the research, and it's about like I didn't quite get it. That is basically the sort of autoethnography you're doing is because you have you are yourself a Gujarati migrant woman.
Yes.
so,
Yes. So
and this wasn't really clear. So I would like I would ask a methodological question, and it's like how this is made explicit in a methodological sense in this research, which, from what I understood, is not there yet. But because we also have research students as audience, it would be nice to if you could expand a little bit more this concept of autoethnography of you vis-a-vis your community, maybe.
yeah, the reason it's become autoethnography is because I am part of the community, which is the Jain Oshwal community that we are focusing on. Although we have to embrace the Gujaratis because as a whole, because the storyline is probably the same for most of the Gujaratis as well. And as a researcher, um, mm, I have to be part of the research group. So I'm also writing and researching. Plus, I have to be part of the community that we are researching. So that turns into the 5 criteria that have been identified, and so along those 5 criteria, because we are doing analytic autoethnography as compared to evocative autoethnography, so you have to and I think the Venter and de Villiers article actually very clearly explains these 5 issues very
Okay.
clearly.
Thank you. Anyone wanted to ask questions?
Yes.
Take the yeah. Go ahead.
Near the beginning, you described perhaps a financialization agenda.
Yeah.
It's leading people to think like capitalists.
Yes.
Perhaps that needs to be more specific because capitalist literally means exploiting other people's labor. At least that's the classical meaning, which doesn't seem exactly the relevant practice here. It seems to be more about encouraging people to think like entrepreneurs, to think of everything as property, as investment, as return on investment, even to invest in themselves, invest in their own future. So everything is then reducible to capitulation and individual responsibility, which really means, in relation to capitalism, it seems to be more about facilitating your exploitation by other people rather than exploiting other people. So, how do you see the relationship to capitalism?
I actually I uh, having lived in Kenya, I think we might, I mean, one of the reasons we were resented, I was too little to think about it at that time, but having, I think one of the reasons we were resented is we did exploit the Africans. We didn't pay them enough. We made them work very long hours. Um, so we did exploit them in some ways. Probably we did look after them as well. So,
Oh,
but
but I meant
well,
in relation to pensions. Yeah, of
yes,
course. Yeah, that's a completely different world. But I mean, now your study of professionals from that background, living in Western countries or anywhere, making decisions on pension schemes. I understood that's your focus.
Yes, for well, retirement income and
Yes.
savings when they can for their later life. That is our focus. That's how it started, the paper. That's how it started. Um, but I suppose we haven't explored the capitalistic view, and perhaps we should think about that a bit more.
Okay.
I haven't really got much to say on that. I think maybe I'm not, to be frank, I'm never ever. For me, it's always I probably been and for a lot of Jains, we've been a lot fortunate than a lot of other Asians who came here because as a community we were also helped into traveling into this country because you needed income to come to this country as well. So the community and the relations probably helped. So the pension is very actually going back. The pension is a very important form of retirement funds because of the British colonial system and the civil servants who used to work. And we can trace it back to India as well, um, that pension has been quite an important item. But the Gujaratis, a lot of the Gujaratis, or rather the most of the Jains, were not employed. They were most of them self-employed. So getting any kind of occupational pension wasn't available. So they had to think differently as to how they would get money for their later life.
Great, thank you very much. We have Gloria. Um,
Yeah.
Gloria? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm Gloria.
Thank you very much.
I'm from Royal Holloway. Um, it's very interesting, Neeta. But
Thank you.
I think you have two stories here, or two papers at least, because there is the migration story, which in itself is very interesting. And I think there is also the pension story. I'm not sure I'm seeing the link between the two as yet. I mean, I suspect that there is a link in the sense that the historical experiences of the group has meant them behaving in a particular way. I mean, you could argue that they had a successful life in Kenya, which somehow was uprooted. So they came to the UK, they went to other places, and in order to assure themselves of their security, financialization, and looking and developing things to ensure that you're not uprooted again, developing roots in terms of finances, etc., to having to move again. Story like that. But as it is, I see a disconnect. I don't see you, and it could be the stage where you are at with the paper. So you haven't really knitted that migration story with the pension story, the pension and the financialization story. And I think I think you need to do that, or else you need to separate the two lines of thought within the paper.
Okay. Yeah, we thought about that. There was an aspect that Pauline and I discussed, and we felt there was another paper there. But that's actually a very what you've just said, and I couldn't get the name of the person before you. Um, I think that has given me quite a lot to sort of now try and pin this down.
It's less.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was the previous person.
Yeah, I didn't get your name.
Oh,
Sorry,
Les.
just say.
Les. Oh, I thought our names appear, don't they?
It's just the surnames. I didn't. I should have.
Oh,
I just.
Your less is only L. Levido.
oh, oh.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can change it. I didn't realize.
Yeah, you could. Okay, great.
I'll try to change it. Thanks for telling.
I don't know if Gloria wants to reply.
No. I mean, that's fine. I think.
I think.
I think you must find the link or else disconnect them, because otherwise the front of the paper and the back of the paper, there is no connection. I didn't see the connection. I mean, you rushed the end. You rushed at the end. So maybe you didn't get enough time to develop or to show us that link. But as it was presented, it seemed as two disjointed stories. And I'm sure there is a link, because the purpose of migration is invariably, you may migrate because of circumstances, economic needs, etc. But then when the migrants arrive and wherever they're going to, then there's a different impetus. And what I'm hearing from you is that this group of people have been very successful. They've been very successful, and they have, I mean, to have even put up that temple in itself is a sign of success, you know. So are you telling the migrant story about success, or are you telling the story about just pensions? And I think it's more than pensions and financialization.
Yeah, I think that was just like the Jainism was a background to understand the difference between the Gujarati community as a whole and the Jain community, who are slightly different. I mean, for most people, we are merged as Gujaratis because we speak the same language. So that was just like a background. So yeah, I think you're right. I didn't merge the beginning and the end properly.
Great. If there is no other question from the participants, I would then give the floor to Pauline, who, from what I understood, she's actually the co-author of the paper, right?
That's correct.
And she's also being the lead of this new research initiative about personal finance within the Open University. So are you there, Pauline? Hi. Can you hear us? I can see that she's like in the list of participants as a guest. It would be.
We had some technical issues, Pauline's end, so it may be that she's not able to speak, or perhaps the headset isn't working.
Yeah. Okay. Is it Neeta? Would you mind to do you know whether you have a sense of what Pauline wanted to add to in terms of the research activities? I don't know. I mean, I'm just asking.
I could let me share the slides.
Because this is kind of an interdisciplinary initiative. I can also talk a little bit if you have the slides.
Yeah, let me put the slides up. Yeah.
So Pauline is not there.
You see this?
That also Susan is there. Susan Newman, our head of discipline. I don't know if she's listening now, but she's also been involved in this new initiative with Pauline. So maybe if you, I mean, I'm gonna go through the slides I can share them if.
Okay, because somehow they're not being shared today.
Yeah, so I can like try to share content. Sorry. Where is it? I get this seminar. Yeah. So can you see it?
Mm.
No. Yeah.
Yes, we can see them.
Great. Yeah. So I don't know if Susan wants to talk a little bit. Basically, the idea was to introduce this new initiative on critical critical perspective on accounting, based on a series of events and seminars. And this is basically, based on this consideration that there is a growing interest in financialization, and there is as becoming an interdisciplinary issue that covers even in the OU researchers working within geography, within economics, within development, within business school, and as a growing academic outputs. So within the Open University, as I can see, as you can see, the list of people working in different branches, so financialization, personal finance, and migration, are quite many, including Susan, that maybe wants to say a few words now. And yeah, so there is. This is basically one of the first of possible events that we might organize on such a topic. So I'm gonna stop to. Can you see my? Yeah, I want to stop. Yeah, can you see me now?
Yes.
There or Pauline?
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I am here, but I wasn't planning necessarily to say much.
Yeah, no, me neither.
It's very much Pauline and Neeta's initiative, but very much Pauline's initiative in the context of the OU. And she has been working, she's written with Stuart, for example, in the area of financialization and pharmaceutical firms. I think, yeah, I've been working in the area of financialization or related to it for some time. And in some ways, I'm quite fatigued by the concept, which is probably not necessarily the greatest thing to say in this context. However, I think there is something to be said about, and I think this is Pauline's point, is that actually, in many ways, it's become a bit of a buzzword. And I remember actually around 2011-12, when a number of people added financialization, I asked them precisely what they meant, and they said, well, they added that because it was easier to get into conferences, and it became a sort of a sign of kind of academic credential rather than really an analytical concept that was useful, could be. And I think some geographers not so long ago have done some work, particularly Brett Christophers, who's been very critical of the concept, but also seen elements that have been very useful. So I think when Pauline and I spoke, I think what I thought was fascinating and really worthwhile doing was actually, because it is interdisciplinary, because actually it is to some extent siloed, because different schools of thoughts and perspectives have tended to look at aspects and processes at very different levels. So at the level of the household, the everyday finance work, I mean, that's some of the earlier stuff, very early sort of literature, that's 2006-07. But then we saw a lot more financialization of corporations type stuff that some critical accountants took on, as well as sort of post-Keynesians. And then you've got some Marxists who look at it a much more sort of bigger picture, understanding in relation to capitalist accumulation and seeing it structural. Structural. I said I wasn't going to say much, and now I've gone off on one. Anyway, the point I wanted to make was I think there is something to be said about looking at it at the very personal level, and breaking out of those silos of understanding. So in that case, I think that this is a very, very useful exercise. And I think maybe one of the first things we can do as a group, and I think your case study, Neeta, which is potentially extremely interesting, can help us do, is to start really defining what we mean and in relation to what. So I think that fits a bit sort of Les's question about what does this mean for capitalism, because I don't know, I'm paraphrasing very poorly there, but I think that's precisely what does this mean for the way in which everyone's lived lives and their economic interactions and activities. What does this all mean, and where does it fit? I think that probably is a really useful exercise, and I look forward to this initiative like that, in that way.
Yeah, great. Thank
Also,
you.
I point out the OU staff have been involved in all-day workshops on financialization, encompassing many aspects. That's over several years, so you're in a good place if you make that connection.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so we hope that Pauline can hear us, and yeah, she's been very keen in launching this initiative, and she's putting a lot of resources there to branch different disciplines within the OU, and also bridging with external researchers such as Neeta. So yeah, I hope that the discussion will continue, and yeah, let's see if, do we have any more questions from the audience? No? Do you want to add something, Neeta? I'm not sure.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thank you, Heidi, for setting this up. I know it worked when we tested it, that I could manage my slide from my end, but today it didn't, and I'm really sorry that Pauline wasn't here. Questions on financialization, she would have been able to answer. Questions on pension, I do know quite a lot about it, and the tribute goes to the late Professor Ola Gaff, who and I have written a paper on pensions, and I used to help her do some of her research interviews for pensions as well. So that's when my interest in pensions has gone, and this work started off because Pauline and I shared a room together at Westminster, and we used to talk about this at ends. And but we didn't actually start writing about it until now. So although we had talked about it, we didn't actually. And originally, as I think Gloria pointed out, it was mainly going to be pensions, and then we included financialization in it. So now we got to marry the two together, basically.
Great. That's, yeah, no, it's great. I hope that we will have the time to organize something in January. That's the plan. So we'll keep everybody posted, and we will be happy to share your email in case. So please write to me in case you want to get in touch with either Neeta or Pauline about this project. Okay, if there are not any further questions, I'm just gonna announce the next seminars, which is gonna be on the 5th on November, and it's gonna be on a completely different topic. So same time, so 12:30 to 2, and we will have Balihar Sankaran from University of Kent, and he will be talking about the power relations of the BRI, in particular between China and Central Asia, and the concept of rentier capitalism. Oh yeah, there are like Sharon Collard, who's kindly asking if you could please share the slides, Pauline. Neeta, sorry.
How do I share them?
You just send any, I mean, maybe either to send email to.
I'm happy to share them. That's
or
fine.
like,
I can
yeah,
share them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that
No
would be
problem.
great.
Yeah,
Thank
leave
you.
it with me. Okay.
Thank
Heidi's
you,
got
Heidi.
all the slides.
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, yeah, but we can also share your email if you don't mind, so that people can.
No,
Yeah.
please share, please. We are all a research community, so
Yeah,
we should
exactly.
be transparent.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, all, and we'll see you on the 25th of November. Hope you could join us for the next seminar. Bye.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, Heidi and Lorena. Thank you very much. Heidi, thank you. We would have been lost without you. So
let's see if we can. Yeah.
Oh, Pauline's there.
Where?
I can see her.
I can't believe it. She's
Pauline
here.
is there. She's waving.
But it's you cannot talk, Pauline, then, but you can hear us. Oh, that's a shame. Okay. Maybe you can record the video and we can share it with the rest of the and yeah, if you want to make a note, we can try to share with the list of participants, because we can now put it in the chat box. Okay.
Put my email here in the chat box.
You can, yeah, of course you can. That would be great.
Oh. Okay, I've got it in the chat there. Can't see. Thank you all. Thank you all for.
All right. Thank you very much.
The time listening to me. And
yes,
such
great.
a shame Pauline wasn't here, because she could have enlightened people on financialization.
She's waving though.
Yeah. Okay, shall I close now?
Okay, yes. All right. Thank you. We will share the recording as soon as possible on our website. Okay. Bye, everyone.
You want to say something because she's waving. Do you think she?
I mean, maybe she can write an email. We can share it with. No, she's just waving, I guess. Anyway, sorry about that. Bye.